Good day, grade 9s. Welcome to today's lesson for natural sciences. We are still continuing with term 1. This section contributes 80 marks towards your mid-year exam, so please pay attention and take advantage of the marks because these concepts are very easy to understand. The topic for today's lesson is systems in the human body, and the subtopic is the circulatory system. My name is Kwanele Dlamini, and this lesson was proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. So without any waste of time, let's get right into it. So what's the point of this lesson? Why are we doing this, and what are we trying to achieve exactly? We are trying to ensure that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the main processes involving the circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs, and the circulation of blood between the heart and the rest of the body. You should also be able to explain the importance of the heart, the blood vessels, and blood in this system. You should lastly be able to discuss the health issues associated with the circulatory system. Now, for more information on this, you can refer to the grade 9 CAPS document on page 58. Let's continue. Now, let's take a step back and revisit some of the concepts that we've learned previously because they lay a foundation for today's lesson. So we're going to take it all the way to grade 4. In grade 4, we learned about living things. But what are living things? Living things are living organisms, okay, but we are still defining a term with the term itself. So let's try and go a bit further. Right, all living things are made up of cells, and these cells have to undergo what? Cellular respiration, okay. So all living things are made up of cells, and these cells have to undergo cellular respiration. Right. What are other characteristics that you can think of living things? You can discuss with your friend if you want. Well, living things have the ability to feed on something, except for plants. Okay. But in the case of animals and other organisms, they need to feed on something. Okay. Right, plants are an exception because they absorb minerals from the soil and water from the soil and the light or energy from the sun to manufacture their own food, so they don't need to feed. Well, another characteristic of living things is that they die at some point, okay? The cells begin to die and the organism dies, okay? But they have the ability to do what? To grow. So that being said, let's look at different examples of living things. Living things come in different shapes and forms. In this case, we have animals in all different sizes, shapes, and forms. They are living things. Why are they living things? Because they are made up of cells, and they have to feed on something, and they have the ability to grow, and eventually they will die. The same applies with plants. They are made up of cells, and they have the ability to grow, and at some point they die. Although they don't need to feed because they absorb minerals, water, and light energy to produce their own food. Then we have bacteria. Bacteria is made up of cells, and at some point it dies, okay? So it's also part of living things. Then we have fungi, same as before. And lastly, we have us, human beings. We feed all of these characteristics. We need to eat. We have cells. They undergo cellular respiration to produce energy for us to be able to function. And we have the ability to grow, and at some point we have the unfortunate event that we need to face, which is death. Okay, let's continue. In grade 8, we learned about respiration. But what is respiration really? Respiration is a process by which living things, okay, we've already defined what living things are, so now it should be easy to understand. Living things take in what? They take in glucose or food, and they break it down in the presence of oxygen to produce energy and carbon dioxide as a byproduct. So every time you eat food, that food goes into your digestive system, and that digestive system has what is called small intestines. And in the small intestines, absorption of these nutrients from the food is taking place. So these nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream, and that bloodstream will take it into the cells where it is required, and cellular respiration will take place. And then you'll be able to have energy to do all your day-to-day activities. As I'm talking to you right now, I have cells in my body that are constantly going through what? Cellular respiration. Right, so we need oxygen, and glucose or sugar or food, right, as the inputs. And then the mitochondria of cells, if you still remember when we did our very first lesson, we said that the mitochondria is the energy powerhouse, or they are the energy powerhouse. So that's where all of this is taking place in the cell. And the product is going to be energy, which enables me to talk as I'm talking to you right now. And the other product, which we don't really need, is carbon dioxide, which we need to breathe out. Okay, that being said, let's move on to our terminology. Right, so the first term we are going to define is an artery or arteries. Arteries are blood vessels that transport oxygenated blood away from the heart. Okay, oxygenated blood is blood that is rich in oxygen. Veins are blood vessels that transport deoxygenated blood back to the heart. So the arteries away from the heart, the veins back to the heart, and it's deoxygenated. Okay, then we have capillaries. They are tiny blood vessels where the exchange of substances like your nutrients and gases takes place. Okay, they are tiny blood vessels where exchange of substances take place. High blood pressure is when the force at which blood is being pushed through the arteries is too high. We'd say you have a high blood pressure condition. Let's continue. Heart attack is when a blood clot that blocks the flow of blood, causing the heart muscle cells to not receive oxygen and the heart to be damaged. Okay, it's commonly accompanied by chest pains, but you will learn more as we continue with the lesson. A stroke is a condition when the blood flow to the brain is stopped and the brain cells start to die because of a lack of oxygen. So oxygen is important for the body, okay? A plaque is a buildup of fatty deposits on the walls of the arteries. Right, so now let's talk about the circulatory system. What do you understand about the word circulatory? What do we mean? When something is circulating, what is it? What does it mean really? Okay, you can think about going around in circles or repeated movements, okay? So it's like when something is cycling, it is circulating. So it starts at a certain point, it goes somewhere and it comes back to the starting point and it repeats over and over again. So the circulatory system is the circulation of blood, the flow of blood from the heart to the lungs or from the heart to the rest of the body. That's basically what it is. And the transportation of nutrients from our digestive system into the bloodstream and throughout the body where there are cells that need it. That's all the circulatory system is about. Okay? So we have circulation of blood from the heart to the lungs, and then we have circulation of blood from the lungs back to the heart, and from the heart to the rest of the body, and from the rest of the body back to the heart. Okay, so this lesson is tailored in addressing that entire situation where you have blood flowing throughout the body. Right, so let's just continue. So every time you take a breath, every time you breathe in, there's air that goes into your respiratory system. Now I know that can be confusing because we said we are looking at the circulatory system, but now we are talking about the respiratory system. Well, in true honesty, you can't really separate these systems from each other. Right, they work hand in hand because the respiratory system helps with the intake of oxygen and the release of carbon dioxide. And the circulatory system works with the circulation of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in the body. So they work hand in hand, okay? So the oxygen from the air is needed by every cell in our body. Now, why would our cells need this oxygen? For cellular respiration. So the respiratory system cannot really be divorced from the circulatory system because they need each other in order to be able to function. Right. So the heart is the organ that pumps blood containing oxygen to all parts of the body. Okay, so we need the respiratory system to get the oxygen, and we need the heart to pump blood that contains this oxygen to the rest of the body. Okay. Right, so the circulatory system and the respiratory systems work together to supply cells with the nutrients and oxygen needed to keep them alive. Right, so if the cells no longer get the oxygen that they need from the respiratory system, they will begin to die. Okay, so we need this oxygen from the respiratory system so that we can keep the circulatory system in place and the cells from dying. Okay, the moment they stop receiving oxygen and being unable to get rid of the carbon dioxide, then they will start to die. Okay, so waste products are also removed by these two systems. What waste products can you think of that are removed by these two systems? Yes, that is correct. It will be carbon dioxide. Okay, let's continue. The function of the circulatory system. What does it actually do? Okay, it transports oxygen to cells and removes carbon dioxide and other waste from the cells. Remember we said cellular respiration needs what? It needs oxygen. Where does the oxygen come from? It comes from the respiratory system. So when you breathe in, the air that you breathe in is rich in oxygen and it goes into your lungs. And then in your lungs there's something called the alveolus. And this alveolus is connected to the blood capillaries, right? So blood capillaries are tiny blood vessels that are connected to organs and the alveolus and cells, right? So there's going to be diffusion. The oxygen from the alveolus is going to diffuse into the blood vessels, while the carbon dioxide coming from cells will diffuse into the alveolus, right? Then that oxygen is going to be taken to the heart where the blood gets pumped. So the heart, you can think of it as an actual pump, right? If you don't know a pump is a device that is used to provide a kinetic energy or pressure for fluid to flow, okay? So in chemical plants, okay, there's usually a pump that is connected to a pipe to be able to send liquids or fluids from one point to another. It gives it the kinetic energy or the pressure so that it can flow and even go up to elevated tanks or reactors and all that. But you don't need to know that. Okay, I'm just explaining what the heart does. It provides the kinetic energy so that the blood can flow from point A to point B where it is needed. Okay, right. So the structure of the circulatory system is as follows. We have the heart, which is the pump or the one thing that provides the kinetic energy or the pressure for the blood to be able to move and overcome obstacles that may be present in the blood vessels. Okay? And we have blood vessels, which are the veins, the arteries, and the capillaries, and the blood itself and the lungs. Okay, we said we need the lungs because that's where the diffusion of these gases take place. Okay, right. So here we have the lungs, and as you can see from this picture, the lungs and the heart, they are connected to each other because they work together. They are systems that are working together. Right. So we have the lungs, which are responsible for taking in O2. Okay, when we breathe in through our mouth or the nose, we are taking in oxygen, okay? And when we breathe out, we are taking out what? Carbon dioxide. So the lungs have something called the alveolus where the diffusion of these gases or gaseous exchange takes place. And by diffusion is when a gas is moving from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. Right, so the oxygen from the breath that we take in diffuses into the bloodstream, while the carbon dioxide diffuses from the bloodstream into the lungs. Right, where is this carbon dioxide coming from? The carbon dioxide is coming from our cells, okay? After cellular respiration, there are two products. The energy that enables us to be able to function and the carbon dioxide, which we need to get rid of because it's not needed in the body. So that carbon dioxide is taken to the lungs and we are able to breathe it out. Okay, right. Then we also have the veins. The veins, they carry deoxygenated blood, the blood that has the carbon dioxide. So this is blood that's coming from the cells. Okay, it has too much carbon dioxide. Okay, artery. Okay, this is the blood vessels goes into the heart. Okay, and then we have the arteries. The arteries, they carry oxygenated blood, blood that is rich in oxygen from the heart to the rest of the body. Okay, right. So the artery carries blood that is rich in oxygen away from the heart. And then the vein carries blood that has less oxygen and more carbon dioxide to the heart. Okay, then we have the capillaries. The capillaries are a network of tiny blood vessels that allow for diffusion or gaseous exchange. Okay, what are the main processes of the circulatory system? The main process of the circulatory system is to circulate blood. We've already talked about that. That is the main purpose. And the circulatory system is divided into two pathways. So there are two pathways for the blood to circulate in the body. But what are these two pathways? Interesting. Right. The first one is the circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs. Okay. Why would we need blood circulating between the heart and the lungs? Okay, anyone? Yes, that is correct. The reason why we need blood circulating between the heart and the lungs is because we need to source oxygen and we need to get rid of carbon dioxide. Right. So when we circulate the blood from the heart to the lungs, what we are doing is we are sending blood that is rich in carbon dioxide to the lungs so that gaseous exchange can take place and the carbon dioxide can be removed. Right? It would diffuse into the alveolus, which is a region of low concentration of carbon dioxide. And then the oxygen will diffuse into the blood stream where there is less oxygen. Right? Then that blood will go back to the heart. Why would it go back to the heart? That is because it has not reached its final destination. Okay, so this is the circulation of the blood between the heart and the lungs. The reason is because we need to have oxygen in the blood. We need oxygen in the blood. We don't need carbon dioxide, right? And where do we get this oxygen? We get it from the lungs. Okay, so that's why we need a circulation pathway to the lungs from the heart. And then the second one is the circulation of blood from the heart to the rest of the body. Now, this blood that has gained oxygen from the lungs then goes back into the heart. Right, why would it go back to the heart? Remember, the heart is a pump, okay? It pumps the blood throughout the body. So what happens when the blood is being pumped? It gains some kinetic energy so that it can move vertically up into my brain and vertically down all the way to my toes. Okay, so it needs pressure to be able to go that distance, right? So that's what the heart does. It provides pressure or kinetic energy so that it can move from point A to point B. So we have two pathways: the circulation between the heart and the lungs for oxygenation, and the circulation between the heart and the rest of the body for delivering the blood to the cells that need it the most. Okay, I hope you understand that. Let's continue. So this is basically what we are talking about. Okay, we have pathways here, as you can see. The first one, this is the heart, right? This is the heart. So blood will leave the heart to go to the lungs. Okay, so this is blood that is deoxygenated. And the artery that carries that blood is called the pulmonary artery. Okay, now I know that can be confusing because we said arteries carry oxygenated blood, but now we are saying this artery carries deoxygenated blood. The pulmonary artery carries blood from the heart to the lungs. It's the only one that in this circulatory system that carries deoxygenated blood, okay? But all other arteries, they carry oxygenated blood. Right, so from the lungs, we are getting what? Oxygenated. Right, so the blood gets oxygen from the lungs. These are the lungs, okay? These are the lungs. And the blood comes back to the heart. Why would it go back to the heart? Because it needs kinetic energy to be able to overcome the long distances throughout the body, right? So, before we continue, I would like to remind you that if you have a question or you need clarity on something that you don't understand, please don't hesitate to send your question through to our WhatsApp line, which is 082-760-2630. That's 082-760-2630. Right, let's continue. Now, the blood is back now to the heart. What does it do next? It's now oxygenated, and the heart provides it with kinetic energy or pressure so that it can go to the rest of the body. Right. Some of it will go to the liver. Some of it will go to the gut, which is also known as our digestive system. Some of it will go to the kidneys, and some of it will go to other organs in the body. Now it is oxygenated and it goes to all of these organs. But what's happening in these organs? There are cells, and these cells, they do what? They undergo cellular respiration. So when this cellular respiration takes place, guess what? We need that oxygen from the blood, and we need the nutrients that are in the bloodstream, okay? So part of that nutrients is what? Is glucose or sugars. We need these sugars to be broken down to produce energy. And energy so that I can talk to you. Energy so that you can listen to me and think about what I'm saying to you. Okay? Your brain needs what? It needs energy. Where is this energy coming from? It's coming from the cells that are constantly going through cellular respiration. Right. So what happens to the blood after it has reached each of these organs? It becomes deoxygenated. Why? Because the oxygen was used up to convert the sugars into energy, and a byproduct is carbon dioxide. So the blood here is deoxygenated. I hope now it makes sense why the blood on this side is always deoxygenated. So now we have CO2. Here we had O2, 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 CO2, CO2, O2. So the blood that is depicted in the red side is rich in oxygen, and the blood that is depicted in the blue side is rich in carbon dioxide. So that blood needs to go back to the heart. Why does it go back to the heart? Because the heart is that pump that gives it the kinetic energy to be able to reach its destination. Okay, so from the heart it gets pumped back into the lungs, where it gets oxygen, and the cycle repeats. That's why we call it a circulatory system, because it is a cycle that continues on and on and on. That blood goes to the lungs to get oxygen, and it comes back to the heart to get kinetic energy, and it goes back to the body, and it repeats over and over again. I hope that makes it simple for you to understand the circulatory system and how it actually works. Right, so the circulatory system transports substances around the body. These can be substances such as oxygen, such as carbon dioxide, such as nutrients, and particularly glucose. Okay, so the blood carries nutrients and oxygen to cells and removes carbon dioxide and other waste products from the cells. That's what the blood does, okay? It carries nutrients that are needed by the cells, and it takes away the carbon dioxide that is not needed by the cells, that is produced as a byproduct of cellular respiration from the cells, okay? So the heart pumps this blood around the body. It provides it with pressure or kinetic energy so that it can move around the body. The blood flows through blood vessels, which are known as the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. We said that the arteries carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery is that artery that carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. And the pulmonary vein is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. All other veins carry deoxygenated blood back into the heart. Okay. Right, and the blood capillaries, they allow for the exchange of substances between the cells and the blood vessels, as you can see here. So imagine these being cells, right? So nutrients and oxygen would be taken from the blood capillaries into the cells, and waste, carbon dioxide, would then come there. Right, so the vein will take this deoxygenated blood, that's right there, deoxygenated. Right, the artery carries what? Oxygenated. So there's more oxygen in the arteries except for the pulmonary artery. And there's more carbon dioxide in the veins except for the pulmonary vein. And the capillaries, the blood capillaries, they allow for the exchange of these gases and nutrients between cells and the blood vessels. And they are connected to both the veins and the arteries. Okay, let's continue. The blood that goes from the heart to the lungs is low in oxygen but high in carbon dioxide. So what do we call this blood? It's called deoxygenated. Why? Because it's low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. Right. Again, I want to remind you, if you have a question or you need clarity on anything that we've discussed so far, please remember to send us a WhatsApp to the line which is 082-760-2630. That's 082-760-2630. Okay, let us continue. So the blood that goes from the lungs to the heart is high in oxygen. Why is it high in oxygen? That is because of the air that we breathe in that is diffused into the blood vessels, and now it carries what? More oxygen, and the carbon dioxide that diffused out of the blood vessels into the lungs, which we breathe out. Okay? So now this blood carries more oxygen, which is needed by the cells. So now this blood is what? It is oxygenated. For example, the heart pumps blood which is high in oxygen to your digestive system, as we've already talked about in our example, which is another name for the digestive system. But that digestive system has certain activities that are occurring there, amongst which is what? Cellular respiration, because it's made up of cells. And the carbon dioxide is inevitable. It's going to be produced as a result. When the blood leaves this digestive system, it will contain a high level of carbon dioxide, which needs to go back to the heart and then taken up to the lungs and then out through our breathing system. When we breathe out carbon dioxide. When we breathe in oxygen. Okay. Right. So now let's talk about health issues that are related to the circulatory systems. These are conditions that you or anyone may have as a result of a malfunctioning circulatory system. If there are problems with the circulatory system, there are certain problems that your body will start to show. Okay, so disorders in the circulatory system are usually caused by a buildup of fatty deposits on the walls of the arteries. This is called a plaque. So the arteries, remember the arteries, they carry oxygenated blood to the rest of the body from the heart. So what do we need there? We need these arteries to have enough opening so that they can go, so that it's easy for the blood to flow from point A to the target cells. So now if there are fatty deposits that are building up on the walls of these arteries, it makes it difficult for the blood to flow. You can think of a typical example. Think of a hose pipe, right? If you have a hose pipe and you open up a tap, right? And you let the water flow. It flows easily. But then what happens if you try and place your finger at the opening of the hose pipe and you try to restrict the flow of that water? You are going to cause what? You are going to make it difficult for the water to flow. There's going to be a pressure buildup on the pipe and the water will have difficulty flowing. The same applies with your arteries. If there are fatty deposits, fats that are building up on the walls of the artery, it's going to be difficult for blood to flow from point A to the target cell. Okay, so that's what we mean by this. Right, so if they become large, they may obstruct the flow of blood, and this can result in an increased blood pressure. Right, when you constrict or try to close the pathway for the blood to flow, as similar to the example of the hose pipe, you are building up pressure, you are reducing the volume at which the water can flow, and you are increasing the pressure. So now it becomes very difficult for the blood to flow because it's trying to flow over a constricted or a tiny pathway. Okay, and this will increase the blood pressure. So plague can also lead to an increase in blood clots. Okay, but what are blood clots? What do you think? Well, blood clots are when, okay, they occur when blood forms, they form things that are like blocking the pathway. So it's like it's going to maybe dry up and start to form lumps that are blocking the path for the blood to flow inside the artery or the vein. And when that happens, it causes problems that we are going to address in a second. Right. So a blood clot can break loose and may also become stuck in an artery, preventing blood flow to tissues beyond the clot. So once there are clots that are forming inside the blood vessels, they may end up obstructing the flow of this blood from point A to the target cell. And when that happens, it may cause other issues that we will learn about in this section. Right, so this is basically what a blood clot would look like. Okay, so the blood is forming lumps inside the blood vessel. Right, this is the blood clot there. Right, it forms this thing that looks like a ball, and these are the red blood cells, and they trying to flow in that direction. But what's going to happen now? There is a constriction. They are not going to be able to go to that side. So this side will start having some very negative or bad symptoms. Okay, it's going to start demonstrating bad health issues. Why? Because now the oxygen that is in the blood is now unable to reach the target cell because it's blocked by the blood clot. Okay, let's continue. So high blood pressure is also known as hypertension. It's very common with people that are slightly older in age, but it doesn't mean that as a young person you may not have it. If you have an issue with blood clots in your circulatory system, you are at a risk of developing high blood pressure. So high blood pressure is also known as hypertension. So what it normally does is it forces the heart to work overtime. Okay, the pressure that is pushing against the arteries causes the blood to work overtime because the blood is trying to push the blood to go to the target cells, but there is an obstruction, and then you end up having this high blood pressure. This can weaken or damage the heart muscle and the blood vessel. So imagine you are trying to pump. Okay, let's go back to a pump. I know most of you don't really know what a pump is, but if you have a pump and you're trying to pump a fluid through a pipe and there's no fluid to flow, or the pipe is blocked, that may end up damaging the pump. Okay, because the pump is trying to apply pressure on the fluid, but the fluid is not moving. So that may cause damage not only to the pump but also to the pipe itself. So now in the case of the heart muscles that are responsible for the pumping of this blood, they will get damaged, and the blood vessels themselves, they may end up being damaged because they are unable to withstand the pressure at which the blood is pushing upon it. Okay, So people who have high blood pressure are more likely to get heart diseases. Okay? Why? Because the oxygenated blood coming from the heart is now unable to reach the target cells. Right? So now there's a blockage in the pathway for the blood to flow. So this may end up causing heart diseases because the heart is now unable to fulfill its functions because there's a blockage in the pathway where it's trying to push the blood to flow through. Right, so this can come in the form of severe pains on the chest. Okay, that's when you know you have issues with your heart. You have a heart disease when you're suffering from sharp chest pains. Okay, you need to get in check with your doctor because you may be having heart problems. Right. So high blood pressure, when the force at which blood is being pushed through the arteries is too high. So high blood pressure occurs when the pressure at which blood is pumped or pushed through the arteries is too high than the pressure that the artery can withstand. This pressure makes the walls of the arteries push back harder against the force of the blood and the walls become thicker, limiting the volume or space in which the blood can flow. I've already explained this using the example of a hose pipe. So what normally leads to a high blood pressure condition is when the force at which the blood is being pushed by the heart through the arteries is too high than the arteries can handle. This pressure will make the walls of the arteries to push back. Okay, they try to push back to try and neutralize the situation against the force. And when that happens, the walls become thicker and limiting the volume or the space in which the blood can flow. Okay, then you will develop a high blood pressure. So a normal blood pressure is usually 120/80. Once it exceeds 140, we have a high blood pressure condition. Right, I'm sure you're familiar with this machine. When you go to a clinic or a doctor, they try to put something here on your arm and then they test your blood pressure. Right, so this is basically it. A normal blood pressure would say 120/80, and when it starts to exceed 140 for this number here, when this number is above 140, we start saying that you have a high blood pressure condition and you need medical attention. Right. A heart disease occurs when blood vessels carrying oxygenated blood to the heart are blocked. Okay, so if the heart muscles, if the blood vessels that are sending oxygenated blood to the heart are blocked, then you will have a heart disease because now the heart is not getting the oxygenated blood that it needs so that it can pump it to the rest of the body. And remember, the heart is also made up of cells, so there's going to be issues with the cellular respiration of the heart cells as well, and that may lead to a heart disease. Okay, so this prevents the heart itself from getting food and oxygen. Why would the heart need food and oxygen? I've already explained it. Because of what? Of cellular respiration. Okay, so if the heart muscles get partly blocked, it can cause chest pains. This is called angina. Okay, so if the heart muscles get partly blocked, the heart muscles get blocked, it can cause chest pains, and this is called what? Angina, and you need medical attention for that. This is because the heart muscles are not getting enough oxygen that is needed to fulfill the functions of the heart. Okay, a total blockage of the blood vessels is called thrombosis, and this can cause a heart attack. Okay, so when there's a total blockage of the blood vessels, what does that mean? That means there is not even a droplet of blood that is able to flow through that particular blood vessel. That condition is called what? Thrombosis, and it can cause a heart attack, which has very, very painful chest pains. Okay, the oxygen supply is normally cut off and the heart may stop beating. Now that's scary, and this may be accompanied with sudden death unless the heart starts beating again. So it's a very, very serious condition. So if there's no blood supply, if there's no oxygen supply to the blood may just end up stopping to beat altogether. And that may be accompanied with sudden death, like you could die on the spot, unless of course the heart begins to start pumping again or beating again. Okay, that's why sometimes in hospitals you find people being put on the resuscitator, because their heart is now no longer able to beat on its own and it needs assistance by machinery. And if it doesn't respond to that, then that person will be deemed as a dead person. Okay, let's move on. So heart attack is a blood clot that blocks the flow of blood, causing the heart muscles to not receive oxygen, and this can damage the heart, as we've already explained. Right, so when people have heart attacks, they normally have these sharp pains on their chest because it's the heart not being able to fulfill its functions, and it causes severe pains on the chest. And you need medical attention for that before it's too late. Blood clots that form as a result of plague may break free and become stuck in one of the blood vessels leading to the brain. Right. So the blood clots that we talked about earlier, which form as a result of plague, which is when they are fatty deposits that build up on the walls of the vein, the blood vessels, they can end up blocking vessels that are leading to your brain. Now, can you imagine what's going to happen? Because the brain is responsible for receiving messages and sending out responses. So now what happens if one of the blood vessels that are leading to the brain are blocked? What's going to happen? Your body will not be able to respond to stimuli. Okay, your nervous system will not be able to function properly. This is called a stroke. Okay, when the blood vessels that are taking oxygen to your brain are blocked, you are having a stroke. Okay, so the brain cells supplied with oxygen by the blood vessels will die from a lack of oxygen. So whenever cells don't get oxygen, they die. Why? Because now there is nothing to assist in the breakdown of the food to create energy. So the cells, they just begin to die, because now they can't produce energy to maintain the body, to keep the body alive. Okay? It doesn't matter which part of the body. If there's a cell that's not getting oxygen in your body, that cell will die. And at some point, like for instance, when someone has a part of their body that's no longer getting oxygen, where the cells are no longer getting oxygen, that part of the body dies and it doesn't respond to anything. And even when you touch it, it feels numb. Okay? That part may need to be amputated because it doesn't get the oxygen and it's no longer useful. It's basically dying. Okay? The cells are dead and it's not functional anymore. That's why sometimes it turns a darkish color, because there's no more oxygen flowing to the cells of that particular area of the body. That's why sometimes when people that are suffering from diabetes, they end up having to amputate a leg, because that leg is no longer getting the oxygen that is needed by the cells to keep it alive. Okay, then it gets amputated, or even sometimes an arm, which is sad. Okay, the brain functions in that particular area may be lost. A stroke can cause paralysis, loss of the ability to speak, and even death. Now, some people that are suffering from a stroke, they will have the mouth muscles that are just hanging like this. Why is that the case? That is because the part of the brain that is responsible for telling the muscles to keep the mouth tightened up or in position are no longer getting the messages, because the brain, the part of the brain that is responsible for that is dead. Okay, this happens when you have what? The stroke. As you can see this man on this picture, his lip is like that, because the part of the brain that is responsible for keeping the face muscles in check or telling it to stay in position is no longer doing its task. And as you can see, it looks like even his hand is no longer working properly. That is because the part of the brain that the blood vessels that send messages to the brain that sends oxygen to the brain to tell the brain to respond to hand movements is no longer functioning properly, and as a result this person is suffering from a stroke. Right, now let's do an activity. First question, what do we call blood that is rich in oxygen? Second question, the flow of blood through the body cells and organs of an animal is known as dash. You need to put in the missing word. Third question, what is the difference between arteries and veins? And lastly, why are blood capillaries so tiny? You have 4 minutes to work on these 4 easy questions, and your time begins now. Alright, learners, I hope you were able to answer these 4 easy questions. Now, without any waste of time, let's just get right into the solutions. So what do we call blood that is rich in oxygen? Anyone? Yes, it is oxygenated blood. The flow of blood through the body cells and organs of an animal is known as circulation. Yes. What is the difference between arteries and veins? Arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart, except for the pulmonary artery, while veins carry deoxygenated blood to the heart, except for the pulmonary vein. Okay. Let's continue. The last question. Why are blood capillaries so tiny? Yes, that's correct. That is because so that they can reach all the body cells, and cells are very tiny, to deliver oxygen and take away carbon dioxide. Okay. Now let's summarize our lesson. We said that the circulatory system transports oxygen to cells and removes carbon dioxide and other waste from the cells. The blood carries nutrients and oxygen to cells and removes carbon dioxide and other waste from the cells. The heart pumps the blood around the body. The blood flows through blood vessels such as the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. Okay, we said that the arteries carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery. And the arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. That's blood that is high pressure to be able to reach as far as down in your toes and as far as up in your head or your brain. Okay? And the veins, they carry deoxygenated blood to the heart. Okay? They carry it to the heart from different parts of the body. And the capillaries, they allow for the diffusion of gases and nutrients between cells and the blood vessels. The main processes include the circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs, and between the heart and the rest of the body. We said that the blood circulates from the heart to the lungs to get oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. And then it goes back to the heart. Okay, why does it go back to the heart? Because it doesn't have enough kinetic energy or pressure to be able to reach further away from inside the body, like down to your toes or even up to your head. Okay, so it needs this pump, which is the heart, to provide it with enough pressure to overcome these distances and different parts of the body. Right, then again, another pathway is when it flows between the heart and the rest of the body. So the first one is between the heart and the lungs for oxygenation, and then the second one is between the heart and the rest of the body for pressure and kinetic energy. Okay. The blood that goes from the heart to the lungs is low in oxygen, hence we call it deoxygenated, but high in carbon dioxide. Okay, it's called deoxygenated. The blood that goes from the lungs to the heart is high in oxygen, but low in carbon dioxide, hence we refer to it as oxygenated blood. The health issues associated with the circulatory system are as follows. We have high blood pressure, which is as a result of the pressure at which the blood is being pumped through the arteries is higher than usual, in a way that the arteries push back. They apply pressure back to the blood and causing what? Blood clots that may lead to a high blood pressure situation. Okay, right. And we said that a normal high blood pressure is 120 by 80, but once it gets to 140 by whatever number, it is regarded as too high and you need medical attention for that. You have a high blood pressure condition. Right. Stroke occurs when the blood flow to the brain is stopped and the brain cells begin to die because of a lack of oxygen. So when those brain cells begin to die, the certain functions that they are assigned, they start being lacking or lagging behind. They're not functioning their particular functions. For instance, the face muscles that are supposed to keep the face in its normal position, the muscles of the face tight, they end up being loose because the brain is not able to send the message to tell them to be in position. The same applies with maybe an arm that is no longer functioning properly. It is because of the parts of the brain that are supposed to send messages to the muscles of the arm to facilitate movement are no longer working because they have died. Okay? So then your hand doesn't know what to do. Then a heart attack, which is when a blood clot blocks the flow of blood, causing heart muscles to not receive oxygen and the heart to be damaged. Okay, you will find people with heart attacks, they normally have sharp pains on their chest, and the heart is actually located in the chest. Right. Now for a preview into the next lesson. The next lesson will be on digestive system, a healthy diet. Okay, but unfortunately I won't be there to present it for you. Right, that brings us to the end of our lesson. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a good run from when we began with the cells until today's lesson. This is my last lesson that I was presenting for you guys. I'm going to venture into greener pastures. Thank you so much for staying with me all this time. This lesson was proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. My name is Kwanele Dlamini, and please take care of yourself, study hard, pass your tests and your exams, and we'll catch up later. Right. Please remember to take care of yourself, wear your mask, sanitize your hands, and maintain your social distance, and keep running in zigzag, and make sure you don't get sick, and stay strong. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm out.